The fire brigade followed Nancy into the mine entrance with a rather unpleasant expression. The mine entrance was completely blocked by a huge rock. Zurich inspected the situation and spoke with the retired miners, then returned to Violet. I'll be honest with you. They would all have died in the first place, honestly. It's useless. But you said that if you were to do a rescue operation, let alone food, they would only have a week's worth of water inside, right? Now 65 hours have passed. Exactly. She spoke. He continued, the safest way to enter the tunnel is to drill through that rock. It would take 15 of us at least 5 days to make a hole large enough for one person to pass through. This means that it would take an indefinite period of time to go through the hole in the rock and search the mine shaft to find the miner's location. Yes, let's say the authors use some kind of magic to survive during this time. Okay, let's see. So, let's see, she replied. He continued, none of our firefighters would go into that tunnel to save a stranger. Violet's mind became confused after hearing Zurich's words. It was when she was lost in thought. A carriage stopped and a familiar face appeared. Violet's attending physicians were Beryl, the doctor who gave her medicine, and Eglin, Cannix's co-vice president. Beryl ran trembling and knelt in front of Violet. Madam, Erlin, who followed, asked. Violet asked, you didn't bring this guy here to cut off his head, right? Eglin spoke, the death penalty is an issue that must be resolved carefully. There must be the consent of 2/3 of all judges. No judge would ever sentence someone to death for a crime like this in the first place. Eglin said as if she was already tired of her answer. Violet said, looking down at Beryl who was kneeling. Stay here until the miners are rescued. Not only the rescued miners but also their families are unable to take care of themselves, so there must be a lot to worry about. The doctor then spoke, yes. Of course. As long as you forgive me. While Beryl was speaking urgently, Eglin pretended to hit him. She spoke, don't put conditions on it, you bastard. Violet narrowed her eyes at her actions. Then Eglin gently lowered her hand. Beryl headed to the small village hall carrying a bag large enough to fit his body. It seems like you are unable to go home. For some time, are you going to tell the CEO's parents? Violet looked surprised by Eglin's words which had no hesitation. Winter couldn't bear the embarrassment of having come all the way to Caliban, but it made even less sense not to come. He looked at Violet through a telescope from the bell tower of the chapel he had acquired by arbitrarily giving away money. Hyle said as he organized the documents next to him. The CEO and co-vice presidents don't even ride on the same boat for fear of an accident. Not only are you two in such a dangerous place where a landslide can occur at any moment, but you are also trying to expose the latest technology used in airships. Winter turned around and responded, irritably to his nagging. Then what do you want me to do? My wife was a person who had no reason to meet strangers all her life. She can't say it's my fault that I came here. Little madam, she's not the kind of person who would normally look at a situation like this. Even if it wasn't because of the CEO, his temper. What are you talking about? My wife doesn't live without calculation, so much so that she jumps into something that doesn't work. They should be thankful that they are of the same bloodline as me. Winter said to the skinny inventor who came with him. Hey, if you have anything useful, take it out. Then Solon, an inventor of the same age who was particularly afraid of Winter, opened the bag. I brought you something like this. It's an adhesive explosive. If you attach it like this, you can blow up a rock of that size. An automatic drill powered by electricity, and lastly, a new technology which is operated by remote. The fire brigade quickly lost its strength again. Violet watched Zurich, who was sitting on a flat stone and smoking a cigarette. She asks, how long are you going to sit here? He replied, going faster doesn't change anything. Please don't rush me. She continued, how can nothing change when it's so urgent? They say he's dead anyway. Speed has no meaning. As Zurich spoke and chuckled, Violet. Violet glared at them and then turned around, having no choice. She couldn't figure out how on earth that damn fire brigade was going to take this job seriously. Eglin said it came when she was looking for a way to boost the fire department's momentum. Eglin spoke, it's the Royal Fire Brigade. They say they are people who came to say they will be loyal to the king. It's obvious how to encourage people like that. Use it. Violet's biggest weakness is not knowing how to use what she has. Honestly, it would have been much easier if we had at least fawned over our CEO for money and people in the first place. There may be people down there, but is belief really a problem? This is why people hate moral people. No one ever knows when it might be a disadvantage to me. Violet, who had been quietly listening to Eglin, turned around. When Violet returned, Xeric spoke in a slightly irritated voice. I was planning on starting work soon, so please stop working. Wouldn't efficiency increase if you take breaks from work? What do you serve? Xeric responded to her grave voice as if it were natural, I serve the royal family. She continued, that doesn't seem to be your attitude. How can you be considered serving the royal family when you are so disloyal to my orders? As soon as she said those words, embarrassment appeared in Xeric's eyes, which were under the influence of alcohol. He said as he quickly got down on one knee before her. I'm sorry, Your Highness. She continued, the dissolution of the royal family does not mean the country has disappeared, but what is your attitude? You are not working for the Caliban miners now. Aren't you here to work under my orders as the Princess of Rakround? Then Xeric lowered his head even further. I thought wrong. Thank you for your scolding. I will keep that in mind. She replied, I forgive you. Violet was inwardly surprised but maintained her expression as if nothing had happened. Then turned and walked towards a nearby tree. Then she staggered, crouched down, and covered her face with both hands. The pressure of what she was doing was crushing her. It was just as Eglin said. It wasn't a problem to deceive one's beliefs. There was a high possibility that all the miners were already dead. She was afraid of the taxes that went into this and the labor of the firefighters, and she was afraid of the children who knew nothing and the hopes of the wives who desperately wanted their husbands to be alive, but her hands were suddenly grabbed by a large hand. She muttered, what did you do? No matter what she thought, it was a man's hand, so Violet raised her head, wary, and her gaze met Winter's. Violet was so surprised that her eyes widened. She asked, why are you here? He replied, what a great ability. How can you take off so many men's clothes without lifting a finger? Violet was so happy because it was a moment when she desperately needed someone to rely on, but Violet also started scolding Winter for sarcasm. Is now the time to talk dirty? What's really going on here? He continued, because you never came in without contacting me. Yes. Violet widened her eyes as if she was truly surprised. What does that mean? He continued, is this difficult? That's because you don't come home without even contacting me. She frowned and spoke, I told you I was coming. Here, right, you did it before you left. When Winter really didn't understand, Violet said, imitating Winter's tone. So you're telling me to report that I can't go home every day? What? He muttered. She continued, that's what you said. I followed it because I thought it was your belief. Winter looked blank at Violet's words. Since he didn't say anything, Violet thought for a moment and asked. Winter told her that he brought some equipment with him to solve the problem. She quickly agreed. When they arrived he showed her the things he got. What kind of invention is it? They say it's a machine that can control direction from the outside. The machine is about the size of a plum. This means that if you just drill that much space with a manual drill, it will move on its own. You will be able to confirm that there is someone inside. If the entrance to the tunnel is unstable, find the exact location of the miners and penetrate from above. Violet's eyes widened at his words. Awesome. It will save us a lot of time. The small hole for the mechanical device could be drilled that evening. After inserting the machine into it, the firefighters unfolded a map and moved the machine toward the areas where they believed the miners were now. Fortunately, the tunnel was relatively simple and there were not many blocked parts, so the process proceeded smoothly. However, there were many times when it was judged that the machine had fallen into a place that was not a tunnel and the path was not accurate, so attempts had to be made over and over again. In addition, there was no response from Area 21, where the miners were first thought to be, and Xeric's negative complaint that they were all probably dead threatened to stop the show. However, the chase continued due to Violet's claim that the miners may have moved when the mine shaft collapsed. Then suddenly, in front of the rock, Violet was watching the rope attached to the machine being pulled in the mud. Since the enormous length of rope was being pulled little by little, it was known that the miners were alive. Zurich said in surprise, "If this line moves enough, I don't think 1 or 2 people can do it. It seems like a lot of people are pulling it together." At that time, Violet hurriedly sat down and watched closely as the rope was being pulled. And while watching it being pulled to a certain beat, she picked up a stone and wrote something on the floor. Eglin, who saw it from behind, clapped. "It's a telegraph code," Violet muttered after writing it down. "It looks like all 18 are alive." Everyone was negative, thinking the miners were dead, but as hope began to appear, everyone's eyes sparkled and their bodies gained strength. Everyone started digging, even Winter also joined them. While he was digging, Violet called him. His chest was exposed, and Violet wanted to button up it. He was Slade, and he then spoke. "I knew it, I kept open it so that you could see." He asked her to go and take rest because she had a little fever, but she declined. He then said, "You should go because you have nothing to do here." She then made an embarrassing face and Winter found her cute. Then suddenly, "I think we found the miners." Everyone ran to see. Zurich said, "Wow, I think I heard Miner's voice." Then they all started removing big rocks. It took almost 3 days to search, then finally they found First Person, and one by one they were able to save everyone. Since Violet never left the place, she fainted because of her fever. Winter holds her and shouts for a doctor. The next day when Violet came to her senses, she was on a bed, and she saw Winter was by her side. She thought, perhaps it's because he works out, but it seems like he's gotten more chiseled than before. He gained muscle. Then Winter grabbed her hand. He then asks, "Why do you always wake me up like this?" She had no idea what he was talking about. She asks, "Like what?" He continued, "By touching me all over." She replied innocently, "But I can't shake you like a child." He was then dumbfounded, but then he continued and spoke, "Well, you can touch me all you want, of course you can't touch any other men like this." Hearing this she was flustered. Thanks to this, only after noon did the two come out. Several relatively healthy miners on crutches approached and surrounded Violet. She was a little surprised, but she immediately straightened her posture and prepared to ask how they were doing. But the moment she opened her mouth, the miners began to sing the song for their savior. Then she held Winter's hand and enjoyed the day with everyone. Scene shifts. During lunchtime, Winter and Violet received many gifts. Miners also gave her a letter to express their gratitude. She opened the letter. "Even if we had lost our breath, it would not have changed the fact that Her Highness came running to our rescue. Our children will grow up with hope instead of frustration. Because they had faith that someone would help them." Violet put on a happy expression and carefully packed the letter into her bag. Seeing her happy, Winter tried to tease her, but nothing happened. He thought, "Why I have become like this, I keep getting weak in front of her." Scene shifts. 2 days later at the capital of E. When they arrived they had to meet Ash first. But Winter told her to take a rest because her health wasn't in good shape. Before departure, the Konitz people met Violet. They wanted to give her apologies. Violet asks why they want to apologize. The Konitz women told her that they underestimated Princess Violet because when they met Ash, he looked displeased. They knew he never wanted to help them, but they had no choice but to come to the capital. Then he sent them to Violet. They thought that after all Princess was Nobel too, so why would she help them? But she was indeed different and they are grateful for her help. Then suddenly the carriage stopped. She asked, "What happened?" Winter replied, "Let's go outside, you will get it." When she came outside from the carriage, she noticed a huge crowd coming for her. They were chanting her name. Winter spoke, "It looks like we don't have to go anywhere." To meet Ash. Ash was there too. He looked furious. As Violet suddenly got on the horse, Zurich, who was leading, turned his horse and approached Violet. The people in her hometown were better people than she thought. As she passed the flower path, she waved hello with the gentle attitude she had acquired since childhood. At the end of her path was a reluctant Ash and the chairman leading the council. Violet arrived in front of them. Ash and the chairman waited, expecting Violet to get off her horse soon, but she did not and opened her mouth. "What brings you here?" When she asked, Ash said with a displeased expression. He replied, "What are you doing? Get off your horse and speak." "Why should I do that? You are not even a king." Violet's calm voice spread through the silence. Ash knew his sister's intentions and his fists trembled. In this place where everyone's attention was focused, Violet was saying out loud that he was not the king. However, she got off the horse without much fighting. It was not polite to look down on someone from a horse, whether he was a king or not. Violet walked closer to Ash and said, "Thank you for sending me the Caliban people. I never thought there would be something in my life to be thankful for." He said, "People who are about to get divorced are also healthier." She continued, "I don't know what divorce has to do with health." Violet, tired of the sarcasm, answered calmly. At that time, Xeric greeted Ash politely. Then proceed towards Violet. "Ma'am, the mission is over, so please give the order to disperse." He continued, "Yes, since you gave an order, you should also give an order to disperse." Ash's expression hardened at Xeric's words. Ash had never before seen anyone other than the king give the order for any royal army to disperse in the presence of the king. Xeric got down on one knee in front of her, the firefighters knelt down behind him and looked at Violet. Although Violet was embarrassed, she spoke calmly, remembering what she had grown up watching. "That was a great move. With my sincere gratitude, I hereby order you to disperse." "Thank you, Xeric." And the fire brigade got up from their seats, got back on their horses, and returned to the fire brigade's quarters in the royal castle. Ash glared at them as if going to kill them. What should have been done as soon as the royal family was disbanded was now being done. Violet felt a little sorry for the fire brigade, but she thought it was a good thing that they were disbanded now since they had been playing and eating and receiving taxes. When Violet returned home, replies to her letters were piled up in front of her. As expected, with a few exceptions, most of the answers were deviant from the question. Violet looked bitter at the letters that were avoided by talking about the weather or inviting her to a party. Violet opened all the letters and sighed deeply. Is there really no way? She didn't want to run away. Physical strength was a problem, but it was also a problem that there were more and more precious people in the capital. Above all, winter blooming. What the man said kept getting caught in his eyes. Not knowing him well, she fell in love with him at first sight when she was young, and it was only natural based on his looks alone. But now she knows a lot about him. However, her heart still ached when she saw him. Then suddenly Winter barged in. She shouts, "Winter, please pretend to be polite in advance. I know it's you when you stand at the door, even if you don't pretend to be yourself." "Why don't you know?" He said, "You are strange." "How do you know that?" Violet took a deep breath. "I mean our divorce." He continued, "Oh, because we're talking about divorce." Winter held out the envelope he had brought as if it was a good time. "Please come here today." Violet grabbed the envelope, opened it, and saw that it was a copy of the land document. Violet's eyes widened when she saw the address written there. She muttered, "Imperial Palace." He continued, "I bought everything except the part that belongs to the country. Think about how you will use it in the future. Because now it will be yours." And the back page. Violet checked the next page and found that it was a document from the villa where Margrave Heston's title awarding ceremony would be held. He then spoke, "Come here later. Because you have to gradually learn how to run a hotel. You don't have time." Hearing this she was surprised. She muttered, "How to run a hotel?" He continued, "My property is most likely hotel real estate. What you will receive as alimony is hotel real estate. Of course, you have to learn it. Or perhaps you don't intend to use the buildings for other purposes. Sell it or throw it away." Winter frowned. Even if he didn't know anything else, he was full of affection for the hotel. Violet said as she put the document back in the envelope, "That can't be right." He asks, "Now, what did you want to talk about?" "Oh, that's it." Violet wanted to say something but was speechless due to the enormous wealth in her hands. Violet asked with a shocked expression, "Isn't this all alimony?" He continued, "Of course not. Anything more than that, you have to fight for it with a lawyer." She then replied, "No, now you understand me in the opposite way." While Violet was dumbfounded, a maid's voice was heard outside the door. "Madam, Madam Catherine has come." At those words, Winter's expression wrinkled and he walked over and opened the door. Catherine, who was standing right in front of him, looked surprised. Muttered, "Winter, because of her behavior, he looks angry. I don't know, but even if you were a mother, isn't it rude to come to the bedroom without saying a word?" She spoke, "If it's rude to come to my daughter-in-law's place, it's okay to be a little rude." Catherine spoke in the characteristic, charming tone she often used to her son, and looked at Violet coming up behind Winter. "Violet, we need to talk. For what you asked for." "Of course," Violet replied. Then Winter, who was looking at the two people in turn, asked in confusion, "Is there a story I shouldn't have?" Violet replied, "Yes. It's a story that should only be told between the two of us." He then asks, "Are you trying to talk about alimony?" If they had to talk about anything other than himself, the only thing he could think of was alimony. Violet said, pushing Winter's back, "You should go now, we will continue later." He then replied, "Yes, I was about to leave." Violet took a sip of tea and asked quietly, "I'll think about it. What did you decide to do about the title?" Catherine replied, "I won't change my mind. I can't give the title to anyone else but my son." But my husband was different. Since Winter is the eldest son, he can fully inherit. After all, he is his biological child. Violet continued, "You haven't reached an agreement." Catherine spoke, "Yes. It's a serious matter." Violet was lost in thought for a moment. The Duke and Duchess of Blooming must have been determined to bide their time. It is thought that after divorce and remarriage, Violet's interest will gradually move away from Winter's title. Violet opened her mouth again with a dark face. "If you don't make a decision quickly, I will report it to the capital newspaper. You two gave me medicine." Then Catherine smirked and spoke, "There is no evidence." She asked, lifting her chin. "There are witnesses. Besides, there will be a big problem at social events between the two of you." Catherine continued, "Do you think my son will continue to take your side?" Violet couldn't answer for a moment and closed her mouth. Then Catherine smiled and continued her words. "If you keep insisting on the title, I will no longer be able to love my son. No, it would be a good idea to consider excommunicating him from the family." Violet's eyes widened at the unexpected excommunication. She then spoke, "You mean excommunication? How much has Winter been for the two of you so far?" Catherine continued, "But now he's not giving us anything. If he can't do anything for us, there's no reason for us to consider him our own." Violet felt her heart break at her words. For Catherine, it was a fact that would never change that Winter was not her biological child. Winter's biological mother was not much different from Catherine. At least Catherine was able to give Winter the title of son of a noble family. Moreover, it may have been fake, but it also gave Winter a tenderness that he felt was love. So she says that Winter may be perverse, but her positive personality may not be, but she is not pessimistic. How can you say something like that? Winter truly loved and devoted himself to the two of you. So, if you don't show unnecessary greed, won't our trust be preserved?" Her words filled Violet with disgust. It felt like the air was getting thinner, so she just hoped that this would end quickly. Regardless of her condition, Catherine looked at Violet's envelope, which she had been concerned about earlier, and asked, "Anyway, what was in there?" Violet replied, "Winter said it was alimony." Catherine snorted, wondering how much money was in the envelope. "You know how much my son loves money. He won't just hand over the alimony to you. Whether it is Heston or Lawrence, they will use it to make a profit by paying where necessary." Violet was furious. She spoke, "No. Winter is not that type of person. You don't know anything about your son." Catherine replied, "I don't understand what you know about my son after running away for over a year." Violet continued, "Mother has never cared about your son in your life, so you probably don't know as much as I do." Since she was thinking of getting a divorce, there was no hesitation in calling Catherine names or speaking to her. Catherine looked at Violet as if her heart was breaking. Then Violet took out the documents from the envelope and unfolded them as if showing pride. "I received a villa. Hearing this, Catherine was amazed. She asked, "You mean the northern villa?" "Yes," Violet replied. Catherine's expression turned white at that fact. Catherine struggled to return to her usual soft self and spoke firmly. "Anyway, I will try to reach an agreement, but I will not make any concessions." "Just you know," Violet replied. "All right." Catherine continued, looking towards the garden with eyes full of interest. "Now that I'm here, I want to take a look at the garden." Violet spoke, "Do that way." Catherine continued, "I need to figure out where to put the table." "I'll give you some advice when we have a party later, Violet," Catherine said with a smile and headed toward the garden. Even before her divorce, Catherine seemed to be very interested in this place as her special party space. Like some children born into privilege, she had a sense of superiority that wealth and power had specially chosen her. Therefore, there was an inherent belief that the wealth and power of this mansion were also naturally hers. The bad thing was that it was a force that prevented her from having them. Violet felt heartbroken and wanted to meet Winter as soon as possible. She said to Jen right away, "Jen, I want to visit my husband, but today. Would you please take care of my grooming?" Jen muttered, "Because you care." "What happened?" Violet then told her, "I guess I want to pay attention to my husband as he goes to work." "Ah, don't worry," Jen answered excitedly. The scene shifts to the Airship Research Institute. The director of the Airship Research Institute said, pointing to the 23rd completed manned airship, "We will ensure that no more pilots lose their lives. We are putting all our efforts into emergency escape systems." Winter grumbled, "What does that matter? Speed and flight time are important." The director said, "Isn't the pilot's safety also important?" "Not at all." The director was convinced that the CEO was a man without blood or tears and had no regard for human rights. He said, trembling with fear, "With the news that the CEO has taken over our research center, the number of people volunteering to become pilots has increased tremendously thanks to the money. This is a world where money reigns supreme." Winter then spoke, "I'll ride it." "Yes." The director paused. Winter continued, "I will ride. No one trained as a pilot as diligently as me." The director was puzzled. "It's not that the CEO diligently trained as a pilot, it's just that your physical condition was so superior that you passed everything in one go. Either that or that. Do you know how hard to be born like this?" The director frowned at his joke and then asked because he didn't understand. "So, sincerely, Mr. CEO, are you saying you want to get on the airship?" "Yes. I'm serious about riding it." "Why? To feel the thrill." Winter shrugged his shoulders, took all the files of pilot applicants from his file and put them in the trash can. "Keep it a secret," Winter told the director. The director was embarrassed and called him, but Winter left the director's office without giving any further explanation. What kind of emergency escape is emergency escape? He lost his temper and grumbled, and without realizing it, he headed towards the lab door where his footsteps were being drawn. He walked bustlingly in front of it with his arms crossed, snooping in the direction of the lab's main entrance. His wife said she was coming, but he didn't know when she would come. As Winter wandered around aimlessly, he saw a carriage coming from afar. He went outside and waited, and soon the carriage stopped and Violet got out. Winter unconsciously twitched the corners of his mouth at the sight of Violet dressed up much more extravagantly than expected. He was at a loss as he noticed the researchers snooping around behind Winter, who looked very different from his usual attire, with black fatigue accumulating under their eyes. Winter asked teasingly, holding back his laughter, "Oh, did you say you wanted to dress up when your spouse comes to work?" Violet was embarrassed. "You're wrong." "I am." Winter burst out laughing at her muttering and burst into laughter. Violet's face quickly turned red as she looked gorgeous and sparkly all alone in the lab full of researchers who stayed up all night without even washing their faces. He said, taking off the warm-looking gloves on Violet's hands. "It's okay because it pleases my eyes." Violet spoke, "I need you to hide me." At Violet's urgent request, Winter sat down and started laughing. Violet covered her face with both hands out of embarrassment, but seeing her husband smile like that immediately filled her with joy. The research center was originally a large building built in a large area that was a ranch. When Violet, who was so sparkly that it was difficult to get close to her, entered the room. All the researchers quietly left the place. Violet wanted to get out of there quickly because she felt like she was causing harm, but Winter, who doesn't really care about others, was busy dragging her around and showing her around. He spoke, "If you're curious about airships, I'll show you. Of course, you have to sign a confidentiality agreement before that." She replied, "I'm curious, but next time. I really want to go to the northern villa soon." Winter continued, "You can wear whatever you want. Violet Blooming is someone who doesn't need to worry about anyone." Violet sighed and nodded at Winter's scolding. But her hand tightened on Winter's arm. "But let's go quickly, let's go." Winter glanced at Violet. To be honest, he didn't have anything to show, but it was cute that she was so embarrassed, so he was wasting time. The two immediately got into the carriage and headed north to the Cannock Hotel Villa, near the airfield, where Margrave Heston's title awarding ceremony was scheduled to take place. The villa the two lived in consisted of a grand auditorium building next to a clear lake in the forest and 17 lake houses built at wide intervals on the lake. Now she understands why Ash wanted this place for the ceremony. She was amazed to see how well maintained this place was. Winter told her that this place didn't generate any revenue, but still, he still wanted to maintain it. Violet was surprised because Winter Blooming would never do anything which is not profitable. He told her, "If I'm the only one who has a place like this, that's scarcity, and that scarcity becomes power." Violet nodded at the word rarity. Violet thought for a moment and opened her mouth. "You get tired of things easily. You often change everything, including clothes and watches. People aren't like that," he continued, "because there is no replacement. There is only one family in the world. Of course, we can get married again, but it's not like there are two princesses in Larkround." "Ah, scarcity," she muttered. Hearing Violet's bitter voice, the discontent in Winter's eyes grew even deeper. Winter looked at her with eyes full of irritation and dissatisfaction. He then asked, "Why do you look like that? I should be the one feeling bad in this situation." As expected, he is the one feeling bad. Winter asked with an unconvinced expression. He continued, "Why are you in a bad mood? I would be happy if I were rare." "Yes." Violet nodded and looked at Winter quietly. She continued, "Anyway, there are probably a few more rich people like you on this continent, so I see. You are less than rare to me." He shouts, "First of all, there is nothing. Such a rich person. Is that so?" Violet tilted her head, looked at Winter, and continued, "You're arrogant, number. Logically and mathematically, it doesn't exist." He continued, "I say so. Still, there is a problem." "What problem?" Violet said with a straight face. "It's not the scarcity I'm hoping for." "What do you want?" he asked. He continued, "If you want a healthy man, there are few who are as healthy as me." She then spoke, "I want a man who will make me fall head over heels in love. A man who is like you but not you." Then Winter snorted, closed his eyes, and muttered, "I am the only man like me in the world." She asks, "What does it mean? Are you showing off?" He then spoke, "If you add all the negative things together, where can there be so many men like me? Hyle and Jen said that when our bodies changed. How can you talk about turning into a surplus? They all looked like they were trash that couldn't be recycled. I don't think that's such trash." "That's right. Like all other objects, it is good for humans to be valued highly. I place a high value on you. I decided I needed it. Why is that bad?" "Oh, you really," she muttered. It was clear that he thought that if her value decreased, she would become useless. Violet couldn't immediately say that he should have been loved and raised more. It was clear that these words would greatly hurt Winter, because he was a man who was fully satisfied with the love he received from his parents. As Catherine said, he will be greatly hurt. She raised her head and asked, "What do you think about the next Duke of Blooming?" Then Winter snorted as if it was some kind of nonsense. "What nonsense? Of course, the title should go to the legitimate son." In response to Winter's affirmation, Violet said, "Only cases where bastards received titles." He continued, "None of those bastards have foreign blood mixed in with them." She replied, "Among the strangers, there was no one who was as successful as you, and held the title of the family." That's an expression I like, Winter said with a grin. Violet looked at Winter with powerful eyes, as if telling him to listen to her seriously. She asked, "You wanted power." He then spoke, "I learned my lesson not to do that, enough." Hearing this she was displeased. "I'm sorry about that." He replied, "I don't blame you. I think inheriting a title can be greedy." She continued, "I think it's a waste of time. Besides, you already have a falling out with your parents. You wanted a title so much that you married me, even though you've never seen my face. That's what I still hope for." Winter sighed softly and continued, "Even if my parents are good to me, a stranger is still a stranger. I'm also a bastard. That's not my place." At his words, Violet's hand tightened. Catherine threatened her today over the love Winter had for his parents. She felt like she was going crazy. Violet thought she had to say this. She couldn't let him be deceived by false love forever. Didn't Violet, too immersed in the love my mother gave her, think that she had to sacrifice as much as she could for what Ash wanted? Violet asked, prepared to make Winter angry. "I'm glad you did a good job. I mean, you didn't starve, didn't hit, and sleep safely, right?" He then grumbled, "What is that?" She continued, "Your parents didn't look for you when you left home." Winter's expression slowly crumpled, as if he understood the meaning of Violet's words. He spoke, "What is that? Not everyone in the world is as curious about where other people are and what they are doing as you are." She continued, "No, most people wonder where their family is." He then asks, "So does that mean I am not part of my parents and family?" She was startled, but she managed to reply, "I didn't mean it that way, but..." "Or what?" Winter asked with a wrinkled expression. Then, after thinking for a moment and taking a breath, Violet spoke firmly, "I don't think you get enough love from the two of them." He then spoke in an irritating voice, "How can you love someone as much as your own child?" She muttered, "What is that expression? You once asked me, would I have married you even if you didn't have money? Your parents..." Before she could finish her sentence, Winter took his hand out of Violet's grasp. It's been a long time since she felt like her husband was moving away from her. So Violet thought that her husband must have been spending a lot of time on himself these days. So Violet was even more desperate. She hoped he would crave more love. Winter couldn't control his anger and turned around, then looked back at Violet and said, "Why are you talking to me like that? Why do you say that my parents would have accepted me even if I had no money?" He was so angry that he then spoke, "Get out, right now. Get lost." Winter didn't hesitate to tell anyone to shut up or get out of the way, but Violet was an exception. Therefore, Violet knew how angry Winter was right now, to the point of losing his temper. If it had been anyone else, he would have been beaten up a long time ago. Violet walked to the door. From afar, Winter spoke, "My nightmare." "What did you ask?" "You are going to die, that dream." At those words, Violet hurriedly looked back at Winter. He had the look on his face like a child realizing that he had been abandoned. "You don't know, do you? What is that moment like? You died before my eyes. The bullet went straight into your head and you were bleeding. I'm watching right in front of you." Hearing his pain-filled voice, Violet lost all strength in her body and sat down. Even a person who doesn't know who he is would have a hard time forgetting him if he died like that in front of me. But you, not anyone else, died in front of me. That moment will forever be repeated in my dreams. Damn it, even if I lost all my money 100 times, or my parents abandoned me 1,000 times, it wouldn't be as terrible as that moment. You take my sweet sleep and now my faith in my parents. Very awesome. Now that you've done enough, stop bothering me. Because it feels like I'm in hell." Winter took a step and headed for the door. Violet said, extending her hand to him, "I'm sorry for speaking so carelessly. I just said it on my own. Is that possible? You grew up loved. Really sorry, really." Winter left and the door closed with a bang. Violet flinched at the sound, then repeated the word sorry several times with a blank face. Our video ends here, my dear friends. Thanks for watching this new season. If you want to see more, please like and comment type Winter and Violet. Till then, bye bye and take care.